And my father and mother, who was raised in a very strict environment, raised us. They were so strict. I mean, we basically, when we went outside to play, they came with us. We were never left alone. My mother was a year older than my father, and my mother wasn't finished going through college, so she got pregnant with me, so they had to elope, which basically means they ran away. And they ran away to New Haven, Connecticut, but I was born in Greenville, North Carolina. So my mother was 19 when she had me, and my dad was 18 when he had me. My mom and I were so close together in age that she was almost like my sister, and I'm helping her raise her kids. But my mother ended up having 5 girls. I'm the oldest, right? My brother, by the time he came around, he was spoiled because they kept having kids until they got to the boy. Finally, they had a boy, and they stopped having kids. So I was the oldest, and we were poor. We grew up in the projects. So my father told me what to do. There was no such thing like the kids today. What would you like to be when you grow up? Well, my father, he didn't play that. He said, so you are going to be a nurse when you grow up because you take care of your sisters and brothers. And then you look at my sister Carol, and you are going to be a musician. And I'm not quite sure about you, but I think you're going to be a lawyer. And he had all these ideas in his head, and then he stopped there. Father's goal was one has to go to college, and so that they chose me to go to college. And so basically my family got together. My aunt helped, my uncle helped. That's what they did back then. Everybody helped for one child to go to college. And so being raised in Connecticut, I was afraid to leave my environment. And after high school, I was supposed to go to college in Atlanta, Georgia. And I ended up going to college in Connecticut still because it was close to where I lived, which was probably just 40 minutes. That was Fairfield, Connecticut, which I went to Fairfield University. Finishing school at Fairfield University, went to school to be a nurse. And it was a tough time because back then, I don't know if you know, but I know for a fact that I was the only Black female in that whole school, pretty much, in my grade. And then, of course, the older grades, I had some friends. I always had older friends. My friends were like 3, 4 years older than me. I was different. I knew I was different. I was quiet. I was shy. I was very smart. And because we grew up strict, I didn't talk a lot. And I remember one teacher was very, very mean to me. It was horrible. My mother had to come take up for me. And here I am, an adult going to college. My mother had to take up for me. My mother got in the car, drove 45 minutes to college, and had a one-on-one with this teacher. But I specifically remember it was in pediatrics. And she asked me, she said, how did you just do that? I don't know if you guys know what a mummy's wrap, when you wrap the baby like a mummy, and up to, from head to the entire baby, right? And that's how you hush the baby. Because if the baby's screaming and crying, I knew how to do that because I just told you that my father says you're going to be a nurse because I knew how to I took care of my siblings, all of them. And so I said to the lady, she was a pediatric teacher, and I said, well, I helped my mom and I wrapped my sister up like this from head to toe. And she told me I was lying. And she told me, so I had to stay after school. Now, remember, I'm quiet, shy, and scared of my own shadow. And I'm staying after school because I know that when I got home, I'm going to get in trouble. I called my mother. I said, I was on punishment in school. Just what you and Dad always did when we would tell a lie. But I was telling this teacher the truth. I told her how I wrapped the baby, my sister Carolyn, in the mummy's wrap. And she told me I was lying. And that was my whole young adulthood, going to school, being quiet and shy. And I sort of kind of grew up with my siblings literally taking up for me, literally being the bigger sister, the bigger brother. Eventually, I ended up going back to school after I got my BS. I wanted to get my MS. And then I went to California after I graduated. I went to work at New Haven Hospital. And I became what's called a acute care nurse. I did ICU, I did CCU, I did pediatric oncology, I did rare syndrome. There was this unit called rare syndrome. I believe that it was the most research rare part of the hospital all over the country. Now I found this out many, many years later. I actually took care of a baby. Anthony's head was bigger than his entire body. And I talk about Anthony a lot. And when I say things like that, people go, what? Because you don't really see stuff like that unless you work in a research unit. But at that particular time, remember, I was young. So I'm thinking this is normal, that there's lots of babies like this. There's lots of kids that are grown with, a bigger head, or even a child that they kept secret that had two heads. These things we know about them now. But back then, 50 years ago, we didn't know about stuff like this. But I worked in units like this. And that's why I became so confident in my ability to take care of just about anything. So as I started going to these different specific units, it sort of boring to me to be in New Haven, Connecticut. And that's when I went to California. And when I went to California, I'm now interested in something specific. My grandmother was a Southern, and she basically raised us, like my mother couldn't. So she came to live with us periodically every summer. Eat out of the garden. Don't open up a can. Don't open up a bag. Don't eat that processed food. She kept repeating this over and over and over again. But my grandfather, who snuck, and we would have what's called hot cake Sundays. And he would go against what my grandmother wanted. He would give us pancakes and all kinds of things that basically was against my grandmother's rules. My grandmother was always about model foods. And she says, so what you doing? So I says, I'm studying. She goes, what you studying? I says, biology. She goes, oh. She goes, okay. She couldn't quite get it. So she would go in the kitchen and she would come up with this little bowl, which is one thing. She did that all day. One thing. It was like one bowl of collard greens. And she says, while you were doing your ology, I want you to eat this. So I would just eat one thing. And then maybe 2 or 3 hours later, she may come out with some chicken or something like that. But it was just one piece of chicken. And she says, here, you still doing the ology work? I said, yep. She says, here's your chicken. And I learned that for me, that was the best way to eat because I never got hungry, but it was a little bit at a time. So I just started thinking about my grandmother a lot as I started, going through the years of, working in an environment of health, thinking about my grandmother. So finally, one day, I got bored of Yale New Haven Hospital. I'm working at Kaiser, Permenti, the best hospitals in California, Cedar, Sinai, you name it. So I'm working in these different hospitals. I didn't know how special I was to be working at Yale New Haven Hospital. I knew that I didn't want to stay there because I grew up there. Even though I worked in that research unit, I was the best CCU nurse, the best ICU nurse. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking there's got to be something that's missing because I'm not happy there. And it was naturopathic medicine. I ended up meeting an Indian, and specifically remember that he just kept talking about herbs, and he kept talking about different modalities of taking care of patients, and he doesn't understand why they're doing this and not this. And he just was intriguing in my brain about natural medicine. So now I still think about my grandmother, because my grandmother was all about natural medicine. I specifically remember when we were kids, and whenever we would get a fever, one thing my parents always said, we don't have time to take you for you to be sick. We don't have time. We don't have money. You youngins, they call us youngins, you youngins cannot get sick. They always say that to us. So I remember my grandmother took 2 chairs, one like this and one hard chair, and there was tons of blankets on it. She turned the oven on, and she wiped the entire body with Vicks and onions and garlic and wrapped us up by the heat. And I'm going, either I'm going to wake up dead or something's going to happen here. She allowed us to sweat it out. And the miracle happened. The fever was gone. What was wrong with us was gone. And she said exactly what she always said. I have no time for you youngins to get sick. We were going to school the next day. This happened constantly over and over and over again. So I'm remembering these things. As I'm going through college and I'm working through these hospitals, I'm thinking, why don't we do stuff like this? Why do we take these kids and we put a needle in their vein, hook them up for days and days and days, when you can break somebody's fever like this in a natural way? That's what they've done all these years. When you resonate with what you were supposed to do anyway, and when I go all the way back, and a lot of people may have a problem with this, is that somewhere, somehow, I was being prepared. Even back then, when I was in the hospital, doing hospital work, I was being prepared to do what I'm doing today. Now, even though I didn't quite know how to explain why I kept leaving these hospitals because it was the same as working in the hospital in New Haven at Yale. It was a sick care. But I have to keep going back to the fact that I intuitively I knew was something wrong because I grew up watching my grandmother heal everybody. With my grandmother healing us the way she did it, my aunt would just come in and give us herbs, and then they would give us castor oil, and they could give us. No one went to the hospital. No one went to the doctors ever. So I started thinking like that. Like, what's the difference between this natural remedies that my aunt and my grandmother was doing and what they're trying to teach us as an allopathic nurse, right? So my brain was thinking, there's something more. I have to figure it out. So I started researching and I started reading books on natural medicine and herbology. I met this lady in California, and her name was Eloise. And I ended up going to her because my friend said, and back then my friend Deborah was married to Michael Jackson's guitar player. And she was very intrigued with this called colonics. And colonics is nothing more than just cleaning out the colon. And so I knew about that before I went back to school to become a naturopath. So I'm learning these things, right? So by the time I went back to school to become a naturopath, I knew all this stuff that they was teaching. I knew about how to do detox. I knew about colonics. I knew about herbs. I knew about this. It was very easy for me to go to that different science. Now, here's the thing. When I realized that we never got sick, and I started meeting people that was always getting sick, I had to start thinking there's something to this natural stuff. In the meantime, I have 3 care homes. Senior Care Home 1, Senior Care Home 2, Senior Care Home 3. These are homes for developmentally disabled children and adults. I own them. One would be 6 to 8 beds. Another one that was in Thousand Oaks, California. Then I opened up another one in Simi Valley, California. And then I opened up the third one in Thousand Oaks, California. And these were rare syndrome children. I'm talking about coming from Yale New Haven Hospital, learning how to be an allopathic nurse. By 8 years after that, I had 3 care homes. Now, within these care homes, there were children that had severe disabilities. I had children with tracheotomies, gastrostomy tubes, and so this is 24-hour care. I would hire nurses to help me take care of them. So I said, okay, so now that I've got one down to science, I'm going to open up another one. By the time I opened up the one in Simi Valley, California, they were older. They were like more children, but more of adult type of child children. And I smile a lot when I talk about that facility because I'll never forget this one Brian. Brian had Tourette's syndrome. Lots of people don't know what Tourette's is. We had a severe case of Tourette's syndrome. And I specifically remember we would have IPP classes, individual plans for these kids. And we would have big round table meetings. And all of the social workers and doctors and nurses and physical therapists and occupational therapists, they would all come to these meetings to try to develop a plan for the children that I had in my care home. No one. Brian must have been in 6 or 7 homes in 5 years. So he went to a different home every year, different hospital every year. No one wanted to take care of Brian. Because I told you Brian had Tourette's syndrome, right? Basically, he was out of control with his speech, out of control with his movements. He would not stop with his language. He was out of control. He would scream. He would jump up and down. Except when Brian was with me. He did none of that. None of it. Only thing that Brian would do that made everybody get up was he would just come and squeeze me too tight. I mean, he was just too physical, right? And finally, the team said, what are we going to do with Brian? I says, I think what you're going to do with Brian is leave him here. And they said, well, we can't leave him here. We feel that Brian's dangerous and we should not leave him here. I says, I think you should leave him here because I don't think Brian did one dangerous thing since he's been here. If you think because he's picking me up and he's squeezing me too tight, if you think that's dangerous, I says, then I think that you're really going to have a big problem with Brian because that's not dangerous. That's just Brian showing his emotions. They all stopped and they looked at me and they go, maybe there's something to this, what she's saying. So what they ended up doing was getting more psychiatrists on the team to help me to take care of Brian. So here's the story, all right? After that experience, as much as I loved that experience of taking care of those 3 care homes, something was driving me inside to keep doing what my grandmother wanted me to do. At the end of the day, you heard me say they're just going to give it a psychiatrist. They're going to give Brian some more medications. Most of my patients that I had in all 3 homes, it was still traditional care. We gave them lots of medications. I remember specifically by that time, Whitney was my baby. I had a baby, Whitney, and Whitney ended up going over to Monique, who was laying on the mat on the floor because she was my near drowning baby. She was just huge. She was about, I would say 13, 14, but she drowned when she was 6. So I had Monique that long. So when you have these types of children in the care home, they sort of become like yours. You get very, very attached to them. You start protecting them with your life against the traditional social workers, because their way of me taking care of them was not the way I wanted to take care of them. So after a while, you get tired of fighting with the system. But in the back of my soul and spirit, I just really wanted to do natural medicine. So that's when I decided that I had to leave this, even though my heart was still with them and I was studying while I was developing these care homes. I eventually went into that era. I went back to school. I became a naturopath, and I've been doing this work ever since. No matter developing the care homes, working in all these hospitals, my brain and my spirit and my soul kept saying, there's something wrong. You've got to do something else. And that was natural. And I know that I'm in my element because I believe all those years was supposed to prepare me. I was born in the 50s. So if you think about that, back then, parents do as I say. And I think that not as I do, which my father would say, you can't do what I do. You just do as I say. And for me, that was like the Bible, right? And so if my father said, you're going to be a nurse because you are able to take care of your sisters and brothers the right way. I like the way you take care of your sisters and brothers, so I think you are going to be a care provider. And he would look at each one of us, our personalities, and tell us, not ask us, tell us who we're going to be in life. And not today, people will say, your father, you let your father tell you what to do. And that's just was normal. You know, I never thought that there was anything ever wrong with that. So I did exactly what he told me that he wanted me to do. And along the way, I stayed with that whole scheme, taking care of people. And here I am at this age. And what am I doing? I'm still taking care of people. I did it my way, but I think I did it the way that he wanted me to, because if I tell you what my history was like, you know, being grown up as an allopathic nurse and now I'm a naturopathic doctor, it's still being taking care of people. So I'm still in my same element.